Beneath the peaceful skies of Aetheris, the calm before the storm feels too perfect. For too long, peace has been a distant dream, but dreams can shatter, and when the stars fall, they bring darkness with them. The twin suns of Aetheris cast golden rays across sprawling fields of azure grass, painting the crystalline cities in hues of amber and rose. The air carried the sweet scent of night blossoms, mingling with the metallic temps of spacecraft engines. The capital city of New Horizon gleamed like a beacon of hope, its towering spires reaching toward the heavens as if in gratitude for the hard-won peace. After centuries of devastating war that had scorched continents and poisoned skies, humanity had finally begun to rebuild, to heal the wounds that had nearly destroyed their civilization. Captain Isaac Rohen stood on the observation deck of the Alliance headquarters, his weathered face reflecting both pride and weariness as he watched transport ships glide gracefully through the atmosphere. The reflection in the viewport glass showed a man marked by war, a jagged scar running from his temple to jaw, eyes that had seen too much death, shoulders that carried the weight of impossible decisions. Below, preparations for the Galactic Concordance were underway, the final treaty that would cement peace between humanity and the various alien species they had once called enemies. Streets were adorned with flags representing each participating world, and the air hummed with excitement and possibility. Quite a view, isn't it, Captain? Isaac turned to find Admiral Sarah Chen approaching, her formal uniform pristine, dark hair streaked with silver, a testament to decades of service. Her presence had always brought him a sense of calm, even in their darkest hours during the war. Almost too perfect, Sarah, Isaac replied, his voice low as he absently touched the medallion hanging beneath his uniform. His brothers, lost in the Battle of Centauri. You ever feel like we don't deserve this? After everything, Sarah joined him at the viewport, her eyes scanning the horizon. We paid for it, Isaac, in blood and tears and years. We earned this peace. She placed her hand briefly over his, a gesture that spoke of a bond forged in combat and tempered by loss. Your brother would be proud of what you've built. But even as celebrations began across the planet, darkness stirred at the edges of known space. The stars flickered in the vast expanse, as if warning the galaxy of an approaching storm. Humanity, so close to peace, failed to see the darkness creeping in, an enemy long forgotten, now reborn in shadows. In the far reaches of the Outer Rim, aboard the shadow vessel Vindication, Commander Rex of the Star Reapers watched holographic projections of Aetheris with cold, calculating eyes. Around him stood the remnants of the once mighty Dominion, their faces scarred, bodies augmented with technology salvaged from the war. The chamber pulsed with a sickly blue light, illuminating hateful eyes and clenched fists. The humans believe. They've won, Rex hissed, his voice like metal scraping against stone as he crushed a holographic representation of New Horizon in his cybernetic hand. They believe the Dominion is broken. They celebrate while we have suffered in exile. His lieutenant, a gaunt figure with cybernetic implants covering half her face, stepped forward. The Singularity Cannon is at full capacity, Commander. One shot will render Aetheris uninhabitable. Humanity will lose their homeworld just as we lost ours. Rex's lips curled into what might have been a smile, the facial augmentations stretching his scarred skin grotesquely. And with it, any hope of galactic unity dies. The old order will return, and the Dominion will rise from the ashes. He turned to face the massive viewing port, where the Singularity Cannon hung suspended in space, a monstrosity of engineering, its core pulsing with unstable energy. Begin the approach. It's time humanity remembers fear. Across the void of space, subtle warnings manifested. Patrol ships went missing. Communication outposts fell silent. Strange energy signatures appeared at the edge of sensor range only to vanish moments later. The signs were there for those who knew to look. Lieutenant Myra Torres, the youngest member of Isaac's command staff, brilliant, fierce, with eyes that missed nothing, brought the reports to Sarah Chen's attention first. Her hands trembled slightly as she laid out the data patterns. Commander, these patterns, they're too organized to be random anomalies. The disappearances form a strategic corridor directly toward Aetheris. Sarah studied the data, her brow furrowed as ice formed in her stomach. Take this to Captain Rohen, quietly. When Isaac reviewed the evidence in his private quarters, surrounded by mementos of battles won and comrades lost, something cold settled in his stomach, a familiar dread he hadn't felt since the final days of the war. The tactical display showed a methodical advance, a patient hunter stalking its prey. I've seen this before, he murmured, tracing the pattern with his finger. the Dominion's flanking approach at Epsilon Ridge. But that's impossible. But with resources stretched thin and the treaty negotiations at a critical stage, his concerns were dismissed by the Alliance Council as paranoia. We cannot risk derailing the peace process over unconfirmed suspicions, Councillor Dravos declared during a closed session, his voice dripping with political calculation. The Dominion was destroyed, their fleet scattered. These are likely just remnants of old automated systems, or pirates using salvaged technology. Isaac's fist came down hard on the council table. That's what we said before. Proxima Colony was wiped out. 20,000 souls gone because we ignored the warnings. But the council had made its decision. Isaac left the chamber, fury and determination warring in his heart. Sarah found him later in the memorial garden, standing before the wall of names, thousands upon thousands etched in stone, the cost of their last war. They've blinded themselves to the possibility of another conflict, he said without turning. They're so desperate for this peace to work. Can you blame them? Sarah asked softly, coming to stand beside him. After all this, she gestured to the endless names. Isaac sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 53 years. No, but willful blindness won't protect Aetheris. As the day of the treaty signing drew closer, the anomalies increased. And then came the attack that could no longer be ignored. The civilian transport Meridian, carrying families returning to Aetheris for the celebrations, vanished in a flash of light that sensors recorded as matching no known weapon signature. 3,000 souls lost in an instant, including children who had never known war. The recording reached Isaac as he prepared for the treaty ceremony. The Meridian's final transmission showed families laughing, children pressing their faces against viewports to catch their first glimpse of Aetheris, then blinding light and silence. Isaac stood on the command deck of his ship, the Phoenix, the weight of 1,000 battles pressing down on him. The faces of those who had fallen echoed in his mind, his brother, his parents, countless friends. The faces from the Meridian now joined them. Could he sacrifice himself once more? Could he be the hero the galaxy needed? Even if it meant losing everything. They're testing us, he told his inner circle. Sarah Chen, now his XO commander Vexel, a towering Meridian with iridescent scales, who had once fought against humans but now stood as their ally, and Lieutenant Torres, whose technical brilliance was matched only by her fierce determination. Testing our defenses, Vexel agreed, his multi-toned voice resonating with concern, scales shifting from blue to a troubled purple. And our resolve, if this is really the Star Reapers, Sarah said, her fingers unconsciously touching the scar along her collarbone, a memento from their last encounter with Dominion forces, then we're not prepared for what's coming. Isaac's scarred hands clenched into fists. We've never been prepared, but we've survived anyway. The memory of Sarah pulling him from the burning wreckage of his ship during the Battle of Proxima flashed through his mind, her uniform torn and bloodied, but her grip unfailingly strong as she dragged him to safety. They'd survived impossible odds before. He looked at each of them in turn, these people he trusted with his life. I won't drag us into another war on suspicion alone, but I won't wait until Aetheris burns either. Prep the Phoenix for a reconnaissance mission. Quiet, off the books. But they were already too late. The attack came during what should have been Aetheris' finest hour, as delegates from 12 worlds gathered in the Grand Assembly for the treaty, signing their ceremonial attire glittering under the crystal dome. The sky darkened, not with clouds, but with ships, hundreds of them, appearing from hyperspace in perfect formation, blocking out the stars like a metal shroud descending upon the planet. At their center loomed a vessel of impossible proportions, its hull a patchwork of salvaged Dominion technology and new, unknown elements. The Singularity Cannon, Isaac whispered as the image appeared on the Phoenix's viewscreen, his blood running cold. They actually built it. The weapon that had been merely theoretical during the war, capable of collapsing a planet's atmosphere, rendering it uninhabitable without destroying valuable resources, was now a terrifying reality. Its central array pulsed with sickly light, energy readings off the scale. Emergency protocols launched into effect. Civilian evacuation ships rose from the surface as Alliance vessels scrambled to form a defensive line. Panic erupted in the capital as citizens rushed for evacuation centers, the sky above them filling with the ominous shapes of enemy vessels. How many can we evacuate in time? Isaac demanded, his voice cutting through the chaos of the bridge. Torres's fingers flew over her console. At maximum capacity, maybe 30% of the population, 70% sacrificed, hundreds of millions of lives. Isaac felt the weight of it crushing him, but his voice remained steady. Begin evacuation protocols. Priority to children and medical facilities. In the silence of space, the stars seemed to burn with an otherworldly intensity. The battle for Aetheris had begun, and every shot fired, every ship destroyed, carried the weight of a galaxy's future. This was not just a fight for survival, it was a fight for everything they had rebuilt. Isaac's voice cut through the chaos on the command channel. All vessels, this is Captain Rohen. Form up on the Phoenix. Defensive pattern, Delta. Priority is civilian evacuation coverage. The Phoenix surged forward, its advanced shields absorbing the first barrage from the Star Reaper's vanguard. Around it, Alliance ships moved into formation, too few, but determined. Blue-white energy beams crisscrossed the void, striking shields and hulls. Smaller fighters darted between capital ships, explosions blossoming in deadly silence against the backdrop of space. They've locked a Singularity Cannon on the capital, Torres reported, her voice tight with fear and anger as warning signals flashed across her console. Charging sequence initiated. Time to full charge, Isaac demanded, already calculating possibilities, each more desperate than the last. 38 minutes. Isaac's mind raced. 38 minutes to save a planet. To save everything they had fought for. We need to break through their line, he decided, moving to the tactical display. Target their escort vessels. Find a path to that cannon. What followed was chaos incarnate. The void filled with weapons, fire, explosions blossoming like deadly flowers against the black canvas of space. Alliance fighters darted between larger vessels, targeting weak points in the Reaper's formation. But for every ship they destroyed, it seemed more took its place. A massive explosion rocked the Phoenix, throwing crew members against bulkheads. Direct hit to decks 5 through 7. An officer called out, shields holding at 60%. On the bridge of the Phoenix, Isaac watched as one of their escort cruisers, the Defiant, erupted in flames after taking a direct hit to its reactor core. The ship broke apart in slow motion, secondary explosions rippling along its hull as escape pods launched desperately into the chaotic battlefield. 700 souls lost in an instant. Shields at 43%, Torres reported, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. We've lost the Valiant and the Intrepid. The Horizon is heavily damaged but still operational. Vexel, manning the tactical station, looked up with grave concern, his scales now a deep, troubled crimson. Captain, at this rate, we cannot break through in time. Their formation is too tight, and our numbers too few. The reality settled over the bridge like a shroud. They were losing. Aetheris would fall. Isaac moved to the viewport, watching as the planet below continued its peaceful rotation, unaware that its fate hung in the balance. So many lives, so much hope. The weight of command had never felt heavier. Sarah moved to Isaac's side, her voice low enough that only he could hear. The prototype, Isaac, it's our only chance. Isaac's jaw tightened. The prototype, an experimental vessel equipped with phase shift technology, designed to temporarily exist out of sync with normal space. Theoretically, it could pass through solid matter, including ship hulls and shields. But the technology was unstable, the power requirements enormous, and no pilot had survived a test run longer than 30 seconds. It's a suicide mission, he said flatly, though they both knew that was nothing new in their line of work. So is this. Sarah gestured to the battle raging around them, another explosion illuminating her determined face. At least that gives us a chance. Their eyes met, decades of shared history passing between them. The nights they'd spent planning missions, the battles they'd fought side by side, the quiet moments after when they'd counted their losses and somehow found the strength to continue. There had always been something more between them, something neither had dared to name in the midst of war. Isaac knew she was right. With grim determination, he opened a channel to Alliance Command. This is Rohen. Authorized deployment of Project Firebird. There was a moment of stunned silence before the response came. Authorization granted, Captain. May the stars guide you. In the Phoenix's launch bay, engineers worked frantically to prepare the prototype, a sleek, single-pilot craft that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its experimental engines hummed with barely contained power as Isaac approached in his flight suit, helmet under his arm. Sarah fell into step beside him, her face a mask of professional calm that didn't reach her eyes. It should be me, she said, her voice brooking no argument. You're needed to command the fleet. This isn't up for debate, Commander. Isaac's voice was firm but gentle. I designed the targeting system. I know its limitations better than anyone. What he didn't say was that he couldn't bear to send her to her death, not Sarah, who had saved him in more ways than she would ever know. Their eyes met, decades of shared history, loss, and unspoken feelings passing between them in that single glance. Isaac, Sarah began, but words failed her. He placed a hand on her shoulder, then, in a break from his usual reserve, pulled her into a brief, fierce embrace. Finish what we started, Sarah. Make sure this peace lasts. His voice roughened. Promise me. Sarah's composure cracked just slightly, her hand gripping his arm with desperate strength. I promise, she whispered. But you come back if you can. They both knew he wouldn't. The prototype's cockpit was cramped, filled with hastily installed systems and blinking warning lights. As Isaac strapped in, the engineers exchanged glances. They knew this was a one-way mission. One of them, an older man who had worked with Isaac for years, clasped his shoulder silently before sealing the cockpit. Isaac opened a channel to the Phoenix. All units, this is Captain Rohen. Continue pressing the attack. Draw their attention. I'm going for the cannon. Good hunting, Captain, came Vexel's solemn reply. May your ancestors guide your path. A tiny craft launched, immediately cloaking as it accelerated toward the massive Star Reaper flagship. Around it, the battle raged with renewed intensity. Alliance ships throwing themselves against the enemy line in a desperate bid to create a diversion. Isaac navigated through the chaos, memories flowing through his mind as he prepared himself for what was to come. His childhood on Aetheris, before the wars began, his brother's laughter, his first day at the academy, Sarah's face the first time they met, fierce and determined even then. Phase shift drive charging, he reported, his voice calm despite the maelstrom of emotions within 15 seconds to activation. The prototype shuddered as a stray shot clipped its wing, sending it into a spin. Isaac fought the controls, his experienced hands coaxing the experimental craft back on course, stabilizing, just in time to see a squadron of Reaper fighters heading directly for him. They've detected me, he realized with a surge of adrenaline. The prototype's cloak wasn't perfect after all. Energy blasts surrounded him as he weaved through the barrage, the prototype's engines straining under the maneuvers. A direct hit caused the console before him to explode in sparks, burning his hands as he maintained his grip on the controls. Pain lanced up his arms, but he gritted his teeth and pushed on. Phase shift at 80%. He gritted through pain, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. I need 60 seconds clear to reach the target. On the Phoenix, Sarah understood immediately. All fighters, converge on the captain's position. Give him cover. Alliance fighters broke formation, charging toward Isaac's location in a desperate gambit. The Reaper fighters turned to meet the new threat. Momentarily distracted, Isaac seized the opportunity, pushing the prototype to its limits as he aimed directly for the heart of the cannon. The massive weapon loomed before him, its surface a maze of conduits and energy fields. The Singularity Cannon grew larger in his viewport, its core pulsing with malevolent energy that would soon destroy his homeworld unless he succeeded. Phase shift drive ready, the computer announced. As warning lights flashed across every system, Isaac took one last look at the viewscreen, at the beautiful blue-green orb of Aetheris hanging in space. Home. Worth any sacrifice, he thought of Sarah, of the life they might have had in peacetime. He thought of all the children on Aetheris who deserved a chance to grow up under peaceful skies. Activate phase shift, he commanded, his voice steady. The world around him seemed to blur, reality itself becoming fluid as the prototype entered a state between existence and non-existence. The ship's hull became translucent, energy crackling along its surface as it prepared to penetrate the Singularity Cannon's shields. Warning alarms blared as the ship's systems began to fail under the strain, the cockpit temperature rising to nearly unbearable levels. 20 seconds until critical failure, the computer warned. The fire of the Singularity Cannon flared before him, but Isaac's resolve was unwavering. He knew the cost of this decision. It was the only way to save Aetheris, to save humanity. With a final glance at the image of his crew he'd placed on the console, Sarah Vexel Torres, and all the others who had become his family, he steered his ship into the heart of the beast. Tell them, Isaac's final transmission crackled with interference, his voice strong despite the overwhelming heat and pain. Tell them we kept our promise. Tell them the stars are theirs now. The prototype penetrated the Singularity Cannon's core, its phase-shifted state, disrupting the carefully calibrated energies. For a moment, nothing happened, heartbeat of silence in the chaos of battle. Then, a cascade of explosions rippled across the massive weapons surface, beautiful and terrible in their destructive power, from the bridge of the Phoenix. Sarah watched in horror and pride as the Star Reaper flagship began to break apart, secondary explosions tearing through its hull as the failed cannon released its pent-up energy in a catastrophic chain reaction. The explosion bloomed like a new sun, temporarily outshining everything else in the battlefield. "All ships, full retreat," she ordered, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "Get clear of the blast radius." Torres stepped closer, her own eyes wet. "He did it," she whispered. "He actually did it." "Of course he did," Sarah replied, squaring her shoulders as she took command. "He was Isaac Rohen. Now let's make sure it wasn't in vain." The destruction of the flagship created a momentary vacuum in the Reaper command structure. Their formation broke, ships scattering in confusion or continuing to fight without coordination. The Alliance fleet, though battered, pressed the advantage, driving back the remaining forces with renewed determination. When the battle finally ended, Aetheris still stood, damaged, scarred, but alive, and in orbit above. The remnants of the fleet regrouped, counting their losses and mourning their dead days later. As the dust settled, the treaty signing proceeded as planned, though in a much more somber atmosphere. The attack had reminded everyone of the fragility of peace, but also the cost of achieving it. Representatives from each world stood together, former enemies now united in common cause. In the Hall of Remembrance, a new monument was unveiled, a simple star of crystalline material that caught the light in ways that made it seem alive with fire. Beneath it, a plaque that read, "Captain Isaac Rohen. His light guides us still." Sarah stood before it long after the ceremony had ended, her hand resting on the cool surface of the monument. She had been offered a promotion, command of the fleetiners that felt hollow without Isaac to share them. "You'd hate this, you know," she said softly to the memorial. "All this fuss, you never wanted to be a symbol." "Indeed he would," Commander Vexal agreed, joining her, his scales now a respectful shade of deep blue. "But symbols are important. They remind us what we fight for, and what we've lost to get here," Torres added, her young face now bearing the weight of experience beyond her years. Sarah nodded, finally turning away from the memorial. "We have work to do. The Star Reapers may be defeated, but they weren't the only threat out there, and I made a promise to a stubborn man that this peace would last." As they walked out into the sunlight of Aetheris, the sky above them was clear and blue, protected by sacrifice, purchased with courage, preserved for future generations. The scars of battle would fade in time, but the memory of those who had fallen would endure. Isaac Rohen was not just a hero, he was a symbol of everything humanity stood for. His legacy lived on in every fight, every victory, and every soul who believed in the dream of peace. The stars, forever changed by his sacrifice, would never burn quite the same again, but they would burn, and humanity would continue to reach for them, guided by the light of those who had fallen so that others might live to see a new dawn.